I truly think this was a highly orchestrated move by the left, the global elites, whoever the fuck is in charge, and it didn't go the way they expected, but it's all like chess pieces on a board, and the game is far from over.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. So it has been a crazy weekend with all the new information, evidence, and theories that have been surfacing in relation to the attempted assassination of Trump, along with all the wild and rampant speculation about if and when Biden would be withdrawing from the Democratic ticket. And as predicted by Newsmax on Friday, on Sunday afternoon, Biden did indeed announce that he would no longer be seeking re-election. And I have to say that this all occurred like as we're recording this podcast in the last 10 minutes. So this is crazy. But Stephanie, this was not done with a press conference. He did it in a letter posted to his official account on X. And here's what he said, quote, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision," end quote. And then he turns around a few minutes later and posts that he's basically endorsing Kamala. And he says, quote, "Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this," end quote.
Okay, the first thing that comes to mind is that he didn't write that. Right? I think there's a reason they posted this on X and that he didn't do a press conference because he's probably pissed about it still, because here, like, they were announcing he was going to step down and then he came out and was saying, "No, I'm not." And maybe they just went ahead and put it out there and, I don't know.
It's such a weird way to do it, to post it on social media.
You know how pissed the press must be, like that,
right.
Not only social media, but X, like Elon Musk. Like, oh my God.
And they're all learning it from X. And you've got news outlets saying like, "This is stunning and unprecedented," which is stupid. Like, we all knew this was coming. And so now what? Now it's just a matter of who's going to be running with Kamala. If she's even the candidate, I mean,
well, that's the thing, because they're going to go to the convention. What is it? August 6th, I think. And they're going to pick whoever they want to pick. I don't think it's guaranteed she's going to be it just because he's nominating her. I think they're going to pick whoever the hell they want. But if they don't pick her, that's going to look really bad. Like, how are you going to explain that when you're the party of identity politics? So,
exactly.
But what this is going to do is pull all the media attention away from Trump and on to, the shiny new object of whoever the new nominee will end up being. That's all the news is going to talk about. And of course, they're going to like turn this into some great, positive, wonderful thing, like the mainstream media. But man,
yeah, they're gonna try to take a page out of Trump's book and make it about unity. Well, it's too fucking late for that. And you know what? I don't think this investigation into Trump is going to go away anytime soon, because even it's been a week now, and just over the past weekend, more and more evidence has come out linking the case to the likely involvement of the deep state and not just a crazy kid acting alone. So I think shit's about to get wild. But before we dive into the details, we want to give a shout out and a big thank you to Shelby655 for the awesome review that you left us on Apple Podcast. So we are incredibly grateful for your support of the show, and we really appreciate you taking the time to leave us a positive review, especially after all the recent hateful reviews that we received trashing our Project 2025 episode. So thank you, Shelby655, and we are honored to have you as a listener. And I want to say, speaking of Project 2025, Stephanie, I don't know if you saw any of Biden's comments that he put out on X about Trump's speech at the RNC on Friday. But while he was self-isolating with COVID again in his beach house, he made like 13 absolutely ridiculous posts on X. And most of them were things that have already been debunked because he's just like a sad old broken record. But it's no wonder the left is freaking out about Project 2025 because the Biden admin continues to push the theory that this is a Trump creation, which again, it is not. But Biden mentioned it, I think it was 3 or 4 of his posts where he was referring to it as Trump's extreme and dangerous agenda that's going to cause more inflation and increase taxes on the middle class and all sorts of these horrors that are going to, quote, destroy democracy. So I think we're going to have to do another episode on this soon and set the record straight about Trump and Project 2025 and maybe piss off the haters again.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I'm really proud of my daughter because she was out with friends and they were talking about just like the shooting and everything that had happened. And they're all very like, most of the kids around here are Trump supporters. But one kid's like, yeah, but what about Project 2025? And I'm like, a high school kid's bringing this up, right? And I was so proud of her because she was like, actually, that's not Trump's. Trump's is Project 47, and it's, different. And and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing that these kids know way more than I did when I was that age. I didn't even know what a Democrat or a Republican was. But speaking of Project 2025, I actually have an updated clip of Trump once again commenting on Project 2025, putting it on the record. So listen to this. This is from his latest rally in Grand Rapids.
Some on the right, severe right, came up with this Project 25, and I don't even know. I mean, some of them I know who they are, but they're very, very conservative, just like you have. They're sort of the opposite of the radical left, okay? You have the radical left and you have the radical right. And they come up with this, I don't know what the hell it is. It's Project 25. He's involved in Project. And then they read some of the things and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. But what they do is misinformation and disinformation.
Okay, so I just wanted to play that so it's on the record once again. He's saying it's not his. Project 2025 isn't his. So, like, obviously, that's all the left has to say because they don't have their own good record. But anyhow, so shifting gears just a little bit. Remember last week when I said that there's been this like timeline shift that's happened since Trump's assassination attempt? I'm going to prove it to you right now because I have a clip of Mark Zuckerberg that's going to blow your mind. So listen to this.
Some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, I mean, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. I mean, the historic events over the weekend. And I mean, on a personal note, it's, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But look, I mean, it's, and I think, look, it's at some level as an American, it's like hard to not get kind of emotional about that spirit and that fight. And I think that's why a lot of people.
Okay, so that's right. Mark Zuckerberg just called Trump a badass. Like, that's something I sure as hell didn't have on my 2024 bingo card, unless, of course, there was this timeline shift. And like, I know I get my hopes up easily, but if even Mark Zuckerberg is a Trump fan at this point, don't you think like Trump's just reached that tipping point where he's too big to rig, like he always says?
Okay, when I saw articles coming across my feed and it was like Zuckerberg referred to Trump as badass, I was like, what? But okay, let's be honest. Like, how can you call that iconic move that Trump did anything else? Because it was epic. And even people who aren't Trump supporters have to admit that. But what I find interesting is that while Zuckerberg stated, and you heard it in that clip, that he's not endorsing either candidate, he also talked about how Meta is going to have less focus on political content this election cycle than what was, on Facebook and Instagram during the 2020 election when everything that was right-leaning or center-leaning was censored as misinformation and disinformation. So I'm just curious to see what's going to happen as we get closer to the election and if they are going to be more moderate in their political content.
I think they have been so far from what I've seen, which has really surprised me. And I think that's great because we know they're not going to be able to control X anymore. Now Zuckerberg, has a strong male role model. So I think the left is losing. I do.
And in regards to is Trump too big to rig? I think that's still questionable because
Yeah.
it really depends what the left has up their sleeve.
That's true. So there's some news from your boyfriend, Senator Josh Hawley. He went on Fox News to share his latest findings with the Trump shooting, and it's very interesting. So he said that when you put the timeline together with the closed door hearing that they had, or I'm sorry, like conversation that they had with Secret Service and DHS, they found out that 62 minutes lapsed between the time that alarm bells were raised with the shooter to the time that Trump was actually shot. 62 minutes. So with that being known, Trump went on Jesse Waters and kind of talked about this security failure. And it's really the first time I heard Trump speaking about it from like this perspective. So I want to play that clip real quick. It's very short.
Hour beforehand, no one told you not to take the stage? No, nobody mentioned it. Nobody said there was a problem. And I would have waited for 15. They could have said, let's wait for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, something. Nobody said, I think that was a mistake. How did somebody get on that roof? And why wasn't he reported? Because people saw that he was on the roof. I mean, you had Trumpers screaming, the woman in the red shirt. She was screaming, there's a man on the roof. And then other people said, there's a man on the roof who's got a gun. And that was quite a bit before I walked onto the stage. So you would have thought somebody would have done something about it.
So I'm glad he spoke up about that because, I don't think I realized until all this came out that this all went down before he even went on the stage. And like he's saying, I would have waited. I mean, take 15 minutes, go check it out. So it just looks very, very suspicious. So Senator Hawley also said that whistleblowers have come forward and said that the majority of security provided to Trump at the rally weren't Secret Service. That shocked me. So Hawley wrote a letter to Secretary Mayorkas saying, quote, whistleblowers who have direct knowledge of the event have approached my office. According to the allegations, the July 13th rally was considered to be a, quote, loose security event. Hawley continued in the letter saying, quote, for example, detection canines were not used to monitor entry and detect threats in the usual manner. Individuals without proper designations were able to gain access to the backstage areas. Whistleblower allegations suggest the majority of DHS officials were not, in fact, USSS agents, but instead drawn from the Department Homeland Security's investigations. He goes on to say that this is especially concerning given that HSI agents were unfamiliar with standard protocols typically used at these types of events, according to the allegations, end quote. Tara, this blew my mind. I mean, it's undeniable at this point that this was like some type of an inside job and someone in the Biden administration set this up. And like, way more about security protocols. Is there ever a situation where there's like a loose security event for an ex-president and leading presidential candidate?
I can tell you this, like when I was with LAPD, I was there during the 2016 campaign season. And unfortunately, I had to work several details for Hillary's election campaign in Los Angeles. And then prior to that, I worked details for both Biden when he was VP and for Obama when he was president, and they made trips to Los Angeles. And I worked various protection details for foreign dignitaries. I do not recall a single time when bomb detection canines were not used as part of the security protocols before any of these people took the stage or were allowed to be in public view. So the fact that strict security protocols wouldn't be put in place for Trump, who is both an ex-president and a high-profile presidential candidate, is just highly suspect, right? And the fact that my boyfriend, Josh Hawley, learned more from whistleblowers than from DHS officials tells me all we need to know about the fact that our federal government is likely somehow complicit in the assassination attempt. And I also want to point out, in complete disgust, I was reading this in The Blaze, and if this is accurate, like, this is really sad. In the 6 days after Trump was shot, not a word from DHS Secretary Mayorkas, except a post on X talking about border security. And it wasn't until this past Saturday when I saw in the Washington Times, they reported that he commented that it was insulting to question the performance of the female Secret Service agents. No, what's insulting is that you people keep trying to feed us bullshit about this investigation. And apparently, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle is going to appear before the House Oversight Committee today. But I'm sure we're just going to get more ridiculous excuses like the slope roof theory about it being too dangerous for agents to go up there that came out of her mouth last week.
I'm sorry, if old man Biden can get out of bed to talk for a minute about Trump shooting, Mayorkas can. Like, that is his job. That's mind-blowing. But I've heard that too, that he
it's
hasn't.
crazy. Absolutely crazy. And I also want to share what was revealed by Rep. Michael Waltz from Florida on Thursday. Because, okay, again, the shooter was 20 years old. But apparently he had 3 encrypted accounts overseas. What kind of accounts? I don't know. The article didn't specify. I couldn't find out much about it. But Stephanie, is this normal for like a geeky loner 20-year-old kid to have overseas accounts? Maybe. Like I said, I don't know much about this thing. But don't you find it strange that almost immediately DHS says the kid acted alone, had no accomplice or co-conspirator, and this was before they could even crack his phone to know for sure, and they're still sticking with the story. But then it comes out that reportedly he has multiple overseas accounts. Like, it doesn't add up. And reportedly there's also a second cell phone involved, but they're not releasing any details about that. And I'm sorry, but there's just no way in hell that this kid was acting alone.
Oh, absolutely. And even Don Jr. is alluding to this. I mean, he never really holds back, but he shared a repost on social media that was originally from Sean Davis. And I'm going to read it. It says, "Pretty crazy how an assassin was given a free shot at Donald Trump after Biden's debate collapse, but right before Donald Trump announced his VP and was formally nominated as the GOP presidential candidate. It's almost as if the whole thing was engineered not just to eliminate Trump, but to require an entirely new ticket free of any Trump influence whatsoever. And then it just so happened the shooter is the only person in the entire country without any social media or online footprint whatsoever. And the FBI, after whole minutes of effort, just couldn't figure out how to crack his phone. What a series of very strange coincidences." And let me tell you something. Having a teenager, there is no way they don't have a social media presence.
Got to pause for 1 second. I just locked my husband out of the house.
Oh, okay. So the shooter has no social media footprint. They found nothing on his phone, yet he had external servers in other countries and also just happened to know how to make bombs with remote detonators. Like, clearly he wasn't working alone. Like, he was the fall guy. Come on.
Yeah, if he's even who they say he is, right? Because I don't know if you've heard this, but there's this wild conspiracy theory going around social media that Crooks is not the shooter, and it was an Antifa member from Pittsburgh. So I was reading this in an article in the Daily Dot, and they were talking about how people online have been comparing the jawbone and the skull shape on the photos of the shooter to photos of Crooks, and saying like very detailed information about how the chin and the mouth and the hairline and the eyebrows don't match up. And the article says, quote, "There's also the ear, which they believe that the surveillance footage of Crook shows a thick helix and a small space between the antihelix, which is basically the inner and outer ridges of the ear. And the Antifa member in the shot of him killed has a wide space between the top of the helix and the antihelix. They're also pointing to a red scar divot from being stitched up, which they attribute to photos of the Antifa member wearing gauges that he may have gotten removed. Crooks has never been photographed with gauges, end quote. I mean, like, these people are going deep on this shit, right? But then it also comes out this weekend that Crooks allegedly threatened to shoot up his high school back in 2019. And one of his former classmates told the FBI that Crooks anonymously posted on the school computer system one day telling his fellow students don't come to class the following day because he put bombs in the cafeteria bathrooms and he was going to shoot up the school. But then they figured out it was him, and the school reportedly didn't take it seriously, even though half the students chose not to show up the following day because they were worried about a bomb threat. Like, how does that make any sense? That dozens of students wouldn't show up for class because of a bomb threat on the school's computer system, and the school would just be like, oh, whatever, and completely dismiss the incident and have no record of it on file. And then this doesn't come up at all for an entire week of the investigation into one of the most high profile incidents in the history of our country. And then suddenly the FBI talks to someone who went to school with this dude 5 years ago. Like, does any of this make sense? No.
No. And the other thing I saw last night on TikTok, right? Because this guy supposedly has no internet presence whatsoever, no social media, no nothing. Well, you know that picture that we keep seeing where he looks kind of clean cut and he's got his hair like gelled and his glasses. They're like, why do they keep showing this picture from years ago when this is what the guy really looked like now? And like there was one picture, he looked like he could be like trans. He had like long hair and it looked kind of like jewelry or something on. And just his whole look, it looked very much like someone you would see that's like super liberal, you know, and they're showing this picture for a reason because they want everyone to think like, oh, he was registered Republican. He was a Republican when he absolutely, you know, was definitely like liberal in his ideology. So it's interesting though, that you bring up that there could, you know, is it this like Antifa member or whatever, because there's now another suspected shooter that was supposedly spotted in a video on the water tower. So I want to play a clip from Redacted where I first heard this. So take a listen.
Reporting from day one that someone was on that water tower. And now 10 eyewitnesses, 10, have come forward to confirm that, yes, someone was on that water tower. So you can throw all these 10 people out. You can say, oh, they're just nuts. You know, they're just Trump supporters. They're just nuts. Or you can listen to them. Who was on that water tower the day that President Trump was shot? And now we have video of a figure, someone on that water tower. Now, initially, RSBN Network originally aired this wide-angle footage from their live stream on their X account during this day. We've now zoomed in and added some text so you can see a figure moving on top of this water tower. So take a look at your screen here.
George's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something.
Okay, here, I'm just going to stop that part because obviously you can't see, but it shows the video where it looks like there's a shadow or something on the water tower and then it leaves. Now, what's interesting is I don't think I've seen videos of all 10 of the witnesses, but I've seen like 3 or 4 of them now, where at the rally, as this is all going down, before anything's come out about it in the news, everyone they're interviewing is saying like, yeah, the guy on the water tower, and yeah, they ran to the water tower. And I did see a video of someone that was behind Trump in the stands before the shooting happened, was recording. And all of a sudden she goes, uh-oh, what's going on over there? And you see all of these, I don't know if they were police or Secret Service or what, but they're all running towards the water tower. And she's like, uh-oh, what's going on over there? And so like, there was this rumor going around too, like word was the water tower. And it wasn't until the news started coming out that people were talking more about the roof, but everyone there was like, yeah, no, there was something coming from the water tower. So it's just like, I don't know what to believe anymore, Tara. And I know you've seen the water tower video, which is very grainy, very out of focus. What are your thoughts? Like, could there have been a second shooter?
Yeah, like I said, I don't I definitely don't think the kid was acting alone. And I want to point out something too that I came across in a recent article in American Military News, because they were referencing a post on X by someone named Bumpy Beats, who pointed out that Crooks had a transmitter with him. Why would this kid need a transmitter unless he was communicating with somebody else?
Right. And we expect this kid to like know how to work all this stuff. I mean, he had like advanced equipment and bombs and stuff in his car. And of course, like the MSM is immediately debunking this. Like I tried looking up articles and everyone's saying there's zero evidence of this. This is fact checked and it is false. There was not another shooter. Well, okay, maybe, but it really doesn't seem like the Secret Service is being very forthcoming so far. And so I think it's way too early at this point to dismiss the potential of a second shooter. And, you know, if it wasn't a second shooter, then what's the deal with the water tower? Why are there 10 witnesses all talking about this water tower? And why hasn't it been investigated a little bit more? And if there's one thing I've learned since 2020, it's to trust my own eyes over the MSM. So I like, again, I want to know what you think about this because you actually were a detective. So like, you know about looking into stuff. I think it requires further investigation. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to point out first, one of the things I read in CBS News, they're like, if you look at Google Earth, the image of the water tower will show that the alleged person was a shadow that's part of the Pennsylvania American Water logo, an event on top. And if you look at it from the front side, that's facing the spectators at the rally, and then it's very clear. That's what they're saying. But then it was also revealed late last week that this kid flew a drone over the location several times before the rally. And the drone was on like a predetermined path or something like that, indicating that he already knew the layout beforehand. So again, I have a hard time believing that this kid acted alone. And personally, I think the entire investigation requires a truly independent review of every single piece of footage and evidence. And when I say independent review, I mean a review not by any agency associated with the Biden admin or our federal government. And I'm going to talk about something from my own experience here, because when I was with LAPD, officer-involved shootings and any kind of deadly and force investigations, they were conducted by a division within LAPD called FID, Force Investigation Division. And I'm pretty sure there was involvement by internal affairs. And then there would be this review process with the Office of the Inspector General, which is not an LAPD organization, but it's affiliated with the city. So everything is related to the city of Los Angeles. And so basically, the investigation was handled internally, kind of like how our federal government is handling this high-profile incident, using one internal agency to investigate another. But when I left LAPD and I went to work for Bremerton PD in Washington State, I thought it was really interesting because it was an entirely different process, and departments were not allowed to investigate shootings involving their own officers. Investigations had to be conducted independently by another police department so that they would avoid any kind of bias or insider influence. And it truly was an independent investigation because when I worked detectives, this was one of my jobs. I was involved in several of these types of incidents, including one officer-involved shooting where I was the lead investigator, and I had to present the findings of the investigation to an executive review board of police chiefs, prosecutors, and government officials from multiple neighboring agencies. And I can tell you that if an investigation is done right, it's an incredibly thorough and painstakingly detailed process. We left no stone unturned, no matter how minor it may have seemed. We interviewed untold numbers of people, even someone who saw a fraction of something related to the incident. And to keep it as unbiased as possible, any detective who personally knew the involved officer, they were not allowed to participate in the investigation. And so I 100% stand behind the process of how it was handled. And I worked with some incredible detectives and officers who had integrity and did the hard shit they had to do, even though it was related to a fellow officer. They were truly unbiased. And this was the process for an investigation involving a cop in a department that most people have never heard of, a suspect/victim whose name never made national headlines. So when it comes to investigating a high-profile shooting like the fucking assassination attempt of a former president and current presidential candidate, especially when the administration conducting the investigation has been complicit in calling for his removal from candidacy and trying to imprison him for the past 2 years, yeah, I don't think that's an unbiased or independent investigation. Who should be conducting the investigation? I have no fucking idea because there is no US agency that I think would be appropriate. But it sure as fuck shouldn't be our own corrupt federal government.
Yeah. And, I think the fact that Mayorkas is staying silent and the Secret Service director is being super shady, it just shows everybody like how much corruption there is. And again, it's like they're just going to keep hanging themselves. I mean, I don't think we're going to get justice. I don't think we're going to get an unbiased investigation, but the court of public opinion can see what's going on. People know what's going on. And so like with the whole assassination attempt, there's like this other piece of it, right? So there is now another update with that investment group, Austin Private Wealth, that shorted 12 million shares of Truth Social right before the shooting. Apparently, they also shorted 34 million shares of Rumble. 34 million, okay? This is like unheard of with this investment group. Now, Trump has a huge stake in Rumble and a lot of other companies. And people are now saying it wasn't just Truth Social and Rumble, but a lot of companies that Trump had a big stake in, that these big players were shorting. So that if he had died, they would have made a shit ton of money, because like it's just undeniable that like this is highly suspect. Okay. And like I said, this isn't typical behavior. It's not like this firm has done this in the past, shorting millions of shares. So it's definitely a red flag. Now, the firm said that the 12 million shares of Truth Social stock was just a clerical error. Oopsie, just a clerical error. But what about the 34 million shares of Rumble? Like way too much to be a coincidence, right?
Yeah, especially since APW has major holdings in what? Vanguard and BlackRock funds. Yeah, I'm sure this was a clerical error and a misunderstanding. And like speaking of all the quote coincidences with this thing, I want to play a clip from Real AF because I've been so excited listening to their show lately because like DJ's gone down the rabbit hole with like how deep APW's connections are with these companies, all this weird shit about like digging up info on their managing members and brokers. And I guess one of the most recent brokers came from where? From JP Morgan Securities. And, they're the company that was involved in the whole scandal with Epstein. And this guy who's the most recent board member was there during the time when Epstein was moving his money around. And so how strange that, all of these companies and incidents are clearly connected. So DJ asked Andy what he thought about it. And I want to play what Andy had to say. It's kind of a long clip, but if I can get my phone to open. Okay.
I mean, look, anybody who can't connect the dots here or refuses to connect the dots is being willfully ignorant because they don't want to accept the reality. There's a lot of people out here right now who are saying that this was a false flag. Dude, you can watch the video from the multiple angles. And this wasn't like Trump throwing a ketchup packet on his fucking ear like some of these morons are trying to say. Also, like I said yesterday, there's nobody in the world good enough to shoot someone's ear off a moving target from 150 yards away. All right. Nobody, not a single person could do it. And it shows the ignorance these people have of firearms and what can be done and what can't be done. And then you see the other angle where the spectators were in the range of fire and taking fire. And you see the one guy in the stands get shot. It is what it is, dude. I mean, we've watched for the last 8 years them villainize this man, demonize this man, attack this man, destroy his reputation, try to paint him as a criminal, try to cancel him, try to impeach him, try to ruin his reputation. They've literally brainwashed a percentage of the country, and I think that percentage is small at this point. I think most people see through the BS. but they brainwashed people based around things that were completely made up, like the Russia collusion. And we could go on and on and on. And they haven't been able to stop this guy. And the more they push to stop him, the more he grows. And that's because people can more clearly see what we're dealing with. We're dealing with tyrants. And it's good for us that we're dealing with incompetent, sloppy tyrants. Okay? Because we can see what they're doing. And I think the game is up for these people. I think everybody pretty much understands what happened. They're just trying to figure out who. But I think breaking down who is behind that SEC filing and that short on DJT stock is pretty fucking accurate to who's been attacking them the entire time. Okay, so
who would benefit? I mean, we're talking about $500 million.
look, dude, there's no reason to skirt around it. These motherfuckers did this. They were planning on fucking getting this dude assassinated. They wanted to try to make a bunch of money, and because they were sloppy, it's now being exposed, and it's being exposed in real time. You know, when they did this stuff with JFK 50 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever that was, there was no internet. There was only one narrative that could be presented. Now we have, you know, thousands of cameras that were on that scene. We have the ability to communicate information instantly. It's just not the same environment, and they're trying to run the same play, and it's exposing them at every chance. And like I said, dude, I think, you know, yesterday I said I think they might be trying to create a retaliatory, you know, action against Biden, but I don't think that's what they're going to do. After kind of observing what's happening here, my opinion is obviously they're going to try again. They cannot have this guy win. You guys have to understand that. Like,
at any cost.
Yes, this isn't over. They're not going to stop. This is, they are not going to allow this guy to win. He's not going to win. It, like, they're, whatever happens here, patriots and Americans that want this guy in office are going to be called to the line of action for him to get into office. That is a reality that everybody has to accept. It's not going to be peaceful. They're going to cheat. I think, you know, the minute after this thing happened and they said, oh, this guy was a lone shooter. We don't know that. You don't know that either. And you actually know he's not, because you guys are you guys are the ones that allowed it to happen. So a minute after the shooting, they have this, you know, Iran issued a assassination plot that's unrelated to this guy who acted alone. Like we said already, you don't know if he acted alone because you can't get in his phone. Okay. In fact, I think a lot of you guys know he didn't act alone. Mm-hmm. All right. Then we have them come out with this Iran assassination plot, you know, an hour, 2 hours later. And what I thought yesterday is different than what I think today. And, you know, that's what happens when you think about things. You change your mind, right? And what I thought yesterday was that this would inspire some sort of retaliatory attack against Biden. But what I actually think might happen here is that they could potentially blow up Mar-a-Lago or blow up an entire building full of 50, 60,000 people to kill this dude and then blame it on Iran. And they accomplish a number of things by doing that. One, they get Trump out of the picture. Two, they get the war they're trying to get. They get that. Three, they probably believe that they will get Trump's base to focus on a war with Iran, and that's how they want to get the American public behind a war with Iran. But that's not going to happen because his base believes that it's Biden and co and Soros and everybody that is doing this.
Not only that, when they realize even if, you know, it is Iran, how do they get here? Oh, the border that you left wide open.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So, dude, like, I don't think that's what I think they're planning.
I can see that, man.
Yeah.
I could definitely see it.
And I don't know if that's, you know, I've just been working this out and working this out and working this out. And that makes the most sense, that accomplishes the most stuff for them and keeps them in a good spot. So, you know, here's the reality, guys. They're not going to let you guys think you got it in the bag and this guy's just going to walk right in and all that. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They're not going to allow him to win. You guys who are voting, you need to figure out how to get everybody that you know to vote for him so that the margin of winning is so big they can't cover it with their cheat. You know, I feel like this is almost a false climax for Trump's people. Like they think, oh, we got it won now. And dude, that's where you lose the game, when you think you got it won. And I think it's very important for people to realize that. Yeah.
Okay, so Stephanie, remember how I said last week, like, I feel like it's too soon to get excited about Trump's victory being a slam dunk because the left isn't going to let that happen easily. And like, I don't want to be pessimistic because I love the energy surrounding Trump right now. And his message has been incredible. It's patriotic, it's positive, it's uplifting, it's unifying. But at the same time, Andy like sums up my feelings in that clip because, like I keep saying, we still have several months until the election. And the more we find out about all these quote coincidences that are being revealed during this investigation, the more we see how deep this shit goes and how all these ties, that everything comes together, right? And the more I believe it was not a whack job kid, it wasn't just a lack of preparation or planning by the Secret Service. Like, I truly think this was a highly orchestrated move by the left, the global elites, whoever the fuck is in charge, and it didn't go the way they expected, but it's all like chess pieces on a board and the game is far from over.
I totally feel like it's a chess game. I think there's things behind the scenes that we aren't seeing, which brings me to the latest coincidence going around TikTok. And it's not even going around TikTok. Like Fox News straight up asked the Trump communications team about this. So Trump gave his RNC speech, right? And to my surprise, like I was shocked that he didn't point fingers at anyone with regards to the shooting. And he kept the message very positive. He was talking about how God Almighty was there and saved him, and how grateful he was for the brave Secret Service agents. That really shocked me. But then at the end of that night, they closed it out with this spectacular live performance of the song Nessun Dorma. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's one of those songs that like gets you feeling all sorts of emotions. It's like an opera song, and it sounds very familiar, but like you can't quite place it. Well, it turns out that that song was played at the end of the movie Sum of All Fears with Ben Affleck. And it's played during the scene of the movie where everyone in the deep state is executed. So kind of like Andy Frisella was saying in that clip that we played last week, that I think Trump is letting them know that he knows without saying it out loud and without saying it publicly. And it's interesting because the next morning is when the global outage happened that kept planes grounded worldwide. And of course, the official excuse is that CrowdStrike was just doing a routine software update of Microsoft Windows that just so happened to have a bug that caused outages worldwide in major sectors, including airports, banks, and government buildings. Like, Tara, can you believe the bullshit excuse? Yeah. I mean, I would love to know how many people were like, oh, yeah, it was just a software update of Microsoft Windows. Like, the dumbest excuse I've ever heard before. So we're talking about the largest IT outage in history. And we're supposed to believe, yeah, they just updated Windows and, you know, something went wrong. So let me just kind of like summarize all the events, right? So you had Thursday night, right before Trump's speech, news reports started saying Biden is going to step down. He's agreeing to step down. He's going to announce it, right? Then Trump ends the RNC with a message for the deep state with that song. The next morning, there's the biggest worldwide IT outage in history. And now all of a sudden, Biden's back saying he's not stepping down after all. And I heard one girl on TikTok and she's like, you know, in those movies where it's really intense and like they're playing poker and then the one guy like loses everything and he flips the table. She's like, this outage is the deep state flipping the fucking table, like knowing like they fucking lost. And so they're going to throw a shit fit that's going to ruin, you know, try to ruin everything. So I want to go a little bit further into this outage because there's some crazy shit with this. Okay. So the name of the company is CrowdStrike. And I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. And so there's this video that resurfaced of Trump talking to Fox News back in the day. And he mentions CrowdStrike being connected to Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and wouldn't you know it, Ukraine. So I got that video. I'm going to play the clip for you right now.
Clinton paid for it, and the Democrats A lot of it had to do, they say, with Ukraine.
But Mr.
You know, it's
President,
very interesting. It's very interesting. They have the server, right, from the DNC, Democratic National Committee.
who has the server?
Now, the FBI went in and they told them, get out of here. We're not giving it to you. They gave the server to CrowdStrike or whatever it's called, which is a company owned by a very wealthy Ukrainian. And I still want to see that server. You know, the FBI has never gotten that server. That's a big part of this whole thing. Why did they give it to a Ukrainian company?
Are you sure they did that? Are you sure they gave it to Ukraine?
Well, that's what the word is, and that's what I asked actually in my phone call, if you know.
Right.
I mean, I asked it very point blank because we're looking for corruption. There's tremendous corruption. We're looking for, why should we be giving hundreds of millions of dollars to countries when there's this kind of corruption? Hillary Clinton paid for it.
Okay, so this is not recent. This is a long time ago. And he's saying that CrowdStrike is very wealthy Ukrainian, was involved in starting it or owns it or whatever. And the DNC gave the server to this company and the FBI let it happen. Okay, so like, let's just keep that in mind. So it's like CrowdStrike has ties to BlackRock too. Okay, BlackRock, we now know from last week, has ties to Ukraine because they're going to be taking care of all the billions of dollars. It also has ties to the DNC. And we're in an election year. We have an upcoming election. The Democrats know they can't win. But that's not all, okay? It gets crazier. A former top FBI executive is the CSO of CrowdStrike. His name's Sean Henry. He's the chief security officer of CrowdStrike. Just left the FBI, I think in 2012. He retired from that government career. And over what he did in the FBI, by the way, he oversaw half of the FBI's investigative operations. He was the executive assistant director. He oversaw the FBI criminal and cyber investigations worldwide, international operations, and the FBI's critical incidents response to major investigations and disasters. He also managed computer crime investigations spanning the globe, established the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, and received the Presidential Rank Award for a Meritorious Executive for his leadership in enhancing the FBI's cyber capabilities. Then he went on to found CrowdStrike's security practice and world-renowned incidents response. Holy shit, Tara, has there ever been a company more tied to the deep state than CrowdStrike, or should we just call them BlackRock? Like, what the fuck is going on?
You know what else is weird? Both Austin Private Wealth and CrowdStrike are headquartered in Austin, Texas. And they've both been involved in these high-profile alleged accidents this week, right? And it's like, I also wonder, was this IT outage just a test for what their capabilities are as we get closer to the election? Because the scale of what happened was unprecedented. It shut down, like you said, airlines, shopping centers, banks, hospitals, emergency operations center, news channels were taken off the air. And this was global. Like, I think the UK, the US, and Singapore were like the hardest hit. And people were saying like, this was the expectation with Y2K that didn't happen. And this was like on that magnitude of a scale, but it wasn't a security incident or a cyber attack. It was just a defect in a standard operating update. Like, sure, okay. I don't buy that.
No. And I think not only were they testing it, I think they were they were conditioning us, because now if there's some type of a outage in November, it's less suspicious because they could be like, well, I mean, this just happened. This is an ongoing issue. And it's
Right.
like conditioning people not to think anything of it.
Yeah. And we have, again, another few months before we get to the election. And like, all these things are happening. It's just, I'm sorry, but it's too coincidental, and we don't believe in coincidences. But I want to switch gears here because just like you, Stephanie, I am starting to totally fall in love with JD Vance. And especially since you sent me that meme of him next to Paul Walker, I mean, they really do have the same dreamy eyes. But the reason I'm starting to sit up and take notice of him is his message. Like, his message isn't hateful, and neither is Trump's right now. Like, their speeches are inspiring. They're all about unity, bringing the left together. I'm sorry, bringing the country together, which is the total opposite of the message being focused on by the left. And before I carry on with what I was going to say about JD Vance, I want to play this clip from Megyn Kelly where she was talking about Trump's latest ad campaign, because this to me is what an ad campaign should be.
Trump being inspirational, not just uplifting, but like, this is how you get over life's challenges. Watch this.
If I give you one message to hold in your hearts today, it's this: treat the word impossible as nothing more than motivation. Relish the opportunity to be an outsider, because it's the outsiders who change the world and who make a real and lasting difference. The more that a broken system tells you that you're wrong, the more certain you should be that you must keep pushing ahead. You must keep pushing forward.
It's
That's awesome.
I got the
such a cool
chills
ad.
again,
Yes.
you know?
And like, it's a drawing. It's like, do you remember that Aha video that came out like when MTV first came about, and it was like the whole thing was a pencil drawing, the whole video. It was kind of like that, but it's just this drawing of Trump, and at one point he's hugging the American flag, and it's such a positive, strong, beautiful message. And all we see from the left is them trying to tear down the Republican candidates, right? And so last week, Kamala said something about JD Vance, like not being loyal to America. So this weekend, he shoots back at her and he says, like, Kamala Harris said something to the effect that I have no loyalty to this country. I don't know, Kamala. I did serve in the United States Marine Corps and build a business. What the hell have you done? And I love when he said, like, this was my favorite thing about what he said over the weekend, because he said he finds it baffling that people are calling Trump radical, because this is the same message that I would offer to the people who left hateful reviews about our podcast on Apple, calling us radical extreme right wingers, because that is so far from the truth. And if you actually listen to more than our Project 2025 episode that you found so triggering, you would know that we are not right wing conservatives at all. And so I want to read part of the article that came out in the Washington Times this past weekend, because it quoted Vance as saying, "There's nothing radical about securing the southern border to stop the poison and the gangs and the criminals from crossing into the country, or passing trade deals that result in making more of our own stuff in Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania. What's radical about telling the drug cartels and the violent gangs across the world, you're not welcome in this country? There's nothing radical about having a strong national security, that when we go to war, we punch and we punch hard, but being cautious and not trying to get America involved in every far-flung corner conflict of the world. Sometimes, my friends, it is none of our business and we ought to stay out of it. That is not radical. That is common sense." Like, Stephanie, don't you love that?
Yes, I do. And, Trump said that too about like not being left or right or radical. He was like, we're doing common sense. And that's what you and I like really started this podcast for, is like, let's just use our heads and common sense here. And I think when you played that ad, I think it sums it up perfectly. And I've been thinking about this a lot over the past few days, watching the rallies, watching the RNC. The right is more fun. People are laughing. People joke. Like something bad happens, something horrific, like an assassination attempt, and people are still smiling and coming together. We're not calling for the death of anyone. And then you look at the left, and it is so ugly. It is filled with hatred, pure hatred and vitriol, and it feels icky and it feels gross, and they're eating themselves. Like they are attacking one another. They're trying to plan a coup to get Biden out of there. Like it's crystal clear. And I think that a lot of people are starting to realize that and realize, you know what? I don't want this nasty, hateful energy anymore. Like I want to get back to what America used to be, which was a prosperous country where everyone had a fighting chance. And I feel like we are more patriotic now than we've been possibly ever, like not ever, but since I was born, or maybe since I was a kid. I was too young to remember, but there is a sense of patriotism that is happening right now, and you can't deny it.
I would say since 9/11, there hasn't been this kind of patriotism.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. It's like, I don't want to be naive. I want to be optimistic. I want to keep envisioning what I want, because again, like I don't want to call in like the negative. But I agree, Tara, like that they will stop at nothing. So we've got to keep talking about it and just stay aware, and like don't buy into what the media is telling us, because guaranteed it's not the full story.
Yeah, I don't play these like clips from Real AF to be like the doomsday person. I just want everyone to keep in mind that there is an agenda here. They're not just going to let it go quietly, and we all have to stay on our toes.
Well, and he's absolutely right that when you just assume you're going to win and you kind of like take your eye off the ball and like, you can get a little cocky or whatever. I agree with that. I think we have to, know that it doesn't matter how patriotic things look, like every vote's still going to matter. We all have to get out there and vote, and we all need to like share what's going on. And on Megyn Kelly the other day, they were talking about this. They were saying like, it's no longer embarrassing to say you're a Trump supporter. You don't have to worry that you're going to lose your job. You don't have to worry that people are going to cancel you. Like now it's the opposite. It's like no one wants to say they're a Biden supporter, but they don't have anyone to support. They don't have like a leader right now. And it's okay for us to talk about Trump. Like it's no longer this taboo thing. So start talking about it. Like let other people know, and you'll probably find out that most people feel the same damn way.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was a lot of updates for just a few days. We'll see how many more come up, but if they're there, we'll let you guys know. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you back here next time. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.